Is there, okay.
I can tell you that to be a certified law enforcement officer, to be a police officer, requires 52 hours of training prior to hitting the street.
52.
52 hours. Okay. And I can tell you that my position would be, we wouldn't need to put 52 hours in.
And would you require continuous training with regards to concealed carry? Update every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever?
Certification.
Certification, okay. And how long would you recommend that license to carry be given for? Lifetime, or is there?
No, I think that there needs to be a time period. I'm not prepared to tell you today what that time period should be.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Kessler. Okay. First, I want to thank you very much, Sheriff Mahoney. You're my friend. We've worked together on other legislation, and I appreciate the insights that you have made. But I assume that 52 hours is not all weapons training, or is that all weapons training?
No, that's classroom and weapons.
Okay, and but it includes other police issues.
No, that 52 hours is firearms.
52 hours of firearms training. Okay, so I appreciate that. One of the things that, I give a great weight to your testimony on that. One of the things that I've seen in the difficulty, as a difficulty in the past, is defining a handgun. Do you have any thoughts on how a handgun ought to be defined, or how a concealed carry weapon ought to be defined?
Well, I'm here today to talk about carrying of a handgun. I believe that this proposal speaks to other weapons, electronic weapons. I believe this proposal of the three includes that. I'm not prepared to talk about electronic weapons. I'm here to talk about handguns. And a handgun is identified through ATF is Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has adequately identified that firearm. The definition of a handgun, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what it is. I know what it is. I know what it is when I see it.
Terry, can I ask you, if you're still in that corner, is there a definition of a concealed weapon? Yes.
Weapon is defined as a handgun, an electric weapon, a knife, other than a switchblade knife or a billy club. And handgun is also defined as any weapon designed or redesigned or made or remade and intended to be fired while held in one hand and to use the energy of an explosive to expel a projectile through a smooth bore rifle bore. Does not include a machine gun, as defined in statute, a short-barreled rifle, or a short-barreled shot.
Okay, so there's no length, inch length, or anything like that in there in that definition?
No, not in that definition. Really, the limitation on length is really that it has to be designed to redesigned to be fired in one.
Okay. May I ask another follow-up question in terms of that? I'm appreciative of what you say about the law enforcement officers ought to have the ability to know who has that permit when they make a stop, because I certainly think that's going to determine the way they approach that and the safety of the officer to stop somebody who has a permit. You're asking for that, is that correct?
I am.
All right. Is there any specific criteria or anything else on that that would place some limitation on that request?
I know that you will probably hear testimony today from individuals opposed to a database accessible to law enforcement during traffic stops. My belief is that it should be tied accessible only through the DOT database that is used by on-duty law enforcement officers through the mobile data computers or radio systems. Not to create a different environment on how they treat somebody, but to know unequivocally that the owner of that vehicle, or the licensed vehicle owner, has a concealed carry permit. I would expect that the men and women of the Dane County Sheriff's Office, when they make a traffic stop this afternoon, take into consideration that the occupants of that vehicle may in fact be armed. But that doesn't mean that they treat those individuals in that vehicle any different than they would in any other contact. And if accessible, that database is accessible, identifying the owner of the vehicle as being in possession of a concealed carry permit, again, I don't expect that interaction is going to be different than what it is in any other normal contact. Thank you.
Your Representative Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff, we're thinking about that, whether or not that information is available. Wouldn't it be true that in every situation, the officer, when approaching a vehicle, doesn't know whether or not the person in the vehicle is armed? Would you have to assume that everyone might be armed?
Anytime you have contact, I mean, as former Representative Gunderson said, we don't know whether he was armed. But you don't go around, and I wouldn't expect law enforcement officers to treat people disrespectfully based upon the fact that they think that they're armed. But knowledge, knowing that in fact there's a high probability that the individual in the vehicle is armed, knowledge is important to that law enforcement officer. Not because they're going to treat them differently.
Well, I'm trying to get my arms around that. If you're not going to treat them differently, how would that knowledge be used?
An individual officer.
Thank you.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Mahoney, appreciate your testimony. I've gotten to know you over the years and the fine service you provide for Dane County. I want to thank you for that services. And it's always welcome to hear people in law enforcement their expertise in this area dealing with weapons. And although I started deer hunting when I was 12 years old, living in the South, and I never had any training. I learned the hard way. So I'm an avid hunter. I love hunting. I always own weapons. And like I said, I've stated earlier, I'm opposed to this bill as it's written. And I know for sure that we're going to have some form of concealed carry. The 21 years I've been here, we've had to issue enforcement every year for the past 21 years. So again, I can recite the word verbatim about the reason why you should carry it and the reason why you should carry it, so I won't go to that. But I think that you made some strong recommendation, and I hope that you can assist me in submitting with some recommendation that we can make the bill better, make the bill more safe, make sure that the guns won't get in the wrong hands legally. Because those who want to carry this weapon are going to carry it anyway, whether it's legal or not. But how can we prevent those law-abiding citizens from becoming criminals themselves? So this is what I want to make sure we do as a committee. Again, I serve on the penalty committee, and I'll be looking at part of the bill as well. Once the bill passes, and again, I know how to count the tea leaves real well. Been around 21 years, so we will definitely have some form of concealed carry this year. So thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I will give you a few more comments, especially any